Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar, Upskilling the Workforce, Insights from GHNF Project. We've got a great lineup for you today, which I'll go over in a second. So just before we start, I'd just like to go through a bit of housekeeping. So as you would have seen, the recording and the transcription has started automatically on this course, so this session will be recorded. So we'll be sending out a feedback form after the call to everyone who signed up. And once you fill that in, you'll get access to the webinar recording and the slides. So if you do miss anything or you had any other questions or clarifications, then we'll be sending out a feedback form afterwards. Cameras and microphones are turned off automatically. However, the Q&A function is on. So if you do have any questions, feel free to throughout the call, feel free to pop them in the Q&A and we'll do our best to answer them either during the call or at the end, or if it's anything super specific, then we can follow up after the call from our comms email account. And I've mentioned the feedback form as well, so we'll just move swiftly on. So we've got, as I said, a brilliant lineup for you. Today we've got 2 GHNF funded projects who are going to talk through some of the exciting skills initiatives and that's going on within the project as part of the funding received by GHNF. As you said, everyone who applies for the GHNF has an obligation to sort of help to expand, create the foundations for a thriving heat network market. With the heat network sector in the UK, we need to make sure that we are as well as building out these heat networks, making sure that we've got the skills and the skilled jobs in place to support the transition, particularly with things like zoning coming into play. But what I will do is I'll just go over the speakers quickly. So we've got Lisa Johnson and Joseph from Metropolitan Thames Valley and Hemico, who will be speaking about their skills initiatives in the Clapham Park GHNF project. And we've got Alistair Vivian from GTC, who will be talking about the Chiltern Woods GHNF funded project and everything exciting that's going on to expand the supply chain over there. But before we start, and apologies, Lauren, I probably should have included you on this slide, but I will. Obviously, Lauren needs no introduction, but she's our relationship director at Triple Point, who will be giving us a bit of an introduction. So over to you, Lauren.
As you know, I'm always thrilled when my picture isn't on a slide. You always upset me by putting it there normally. So hello, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Lauren Bright. I am, as Michael said, a relationship director at Triple, who are the delivery partner to DESNZ for the Green Heat Network Fund. Are you okay to sort me to the next slide? Thank you. I'm not going to talk to you for too long because the guys talking about their projects is definitely the most interesting thing we're going to have today. But just to give you a little bit of a background as to why we've all got together today. And very quickly, just to note that so the multidisciplinary team at Triple Point Heat Networks have managed the Green Heat Network Fund since 2022, I think. And before that, we also managed the Heat Network Investment Project. The team have assessed over 150 projects now. So we do get to see firsthand how the sector is evolving. And that includes where progress is being made on job creation and skills development, and crucially, where there are still gaps. Today is about that workforce question and delving into what actually happens on the ground in our funded projects. So a little bit of context, the scale is significant. There are around 30 million buildings in the UK, with heating being responsible for roughly a third of carbon emissions. Heat networks are expected to play a meaningful role in reaching net zero, with around a fifth of demand potentially met in this way by 2050. That implies a huge step change in delivery, not marginal growth, but a sustained build out of infrastructure, supply chains and capability. And the constraint that sits under all of that is people. Next slide, please. When you translate that in workforce terms, the numbers are pretty big. So across low carbon sectors, up to 725,000 roles could be needed. For heat networks, that's around 35,000 roles is often cited. But also really important is the shape of that workforce today. In 2023, the Heat Network Industry Council survey said around 59% of those surveyed were at least level 5, and that's a higher skill level. And that's significantly higher than offshore wind, which was around 40%, and rail, which was around 20%. Our industry is also really male dominated, maybe unsurprisingly, with just 19% of employees on the same survey reporting as female. The district heating divas have done an amazing job in empowering women in the industry and providing networking opportunities, but also signposting us as an inclusive, growing infra industry. So this is not just a scaling challenge, it's a pipeline challenge. We need more people coming in at technician and entry levels alongside experienced professionals. And without that, growth will become constrained quite quickly. Next slide. The flip side of this is a genuine opportunity. Heat networks across a wide range of roles, engineering, construction, commercial, digital, customer-facing functions. So this is not about creating a narrow specialist workforce. It's about transitioning and expanding an existing one. It's going to create multiple entry points, people moving across from adjacent sectors, new entrants coming through apprenticeships, and existing teams upskilling. The challenge is going to be coordinating all of that, I think, so we can keep pace with demand. Just before I talk about market transformation commitments, just to pick up on that roles point again, if we look at what's actually needed, it's going to span the full life cycle. So design and development, construction and installation, and then long-term operation and optimization. What we are seeing through some of our GHNF projects is that the pressure doesn't sit all in one place. It's often at the interfaces. And what's important is having the right people with the right skills at the right stage of delivery. That's where delays and inefficiencies can creep in. So there's a workforce planning element to this as well. GHNF is trying to play our part in this, you know, handing out large sums of grant money to projects around the country. We've got some push factor that we can put in here, and we're trying to use the market transformation commitments for that. Three set bits of this I think are relevant here. So we have an infrastructure requirement. We're looking for building capability through procurement and supply chain engagement. Obviously skills, projects are expected to identify gaps in the skills in their local areas and support recruitment and training and engage with initiatives like skills boots camps and the net zero hubs. And also innovation, capturing and sharing learning across projects. One of the reasons why we put these events together is so we can do that information sharing piece. We want our projects talking to each other so that the industry isn't working in silos. The key point is the projects are not only delivering assets, they're contributing to the development of the sector itself and how we can build and sustain the workforce. Thank you. And a shameless plug, I'm going to say, our colleagues at DESNZ have published a set of upskilling videos just in the last couple of weeks, and they're focusing on operations and maintenance. They're short, targeted, aimed at people working directly on networks. They cover things like system performance, fault identification and optimization. One of the interesting things is I think this matters because the sector is now moving beyond construction. Operational performance is now critical, both for carbon outcomes and for the customers. And these resources should be a simple way to build capability quickly, particularly for those transitioning into the sector or looking to deepen existing skill set. They're available online and worth a look. I'm sure we can pop a link to those in the chat. So before I hand over, just stepping back, the workforce challenge is real, but so is the opportunity. What we're seeing now is projects starting to respond to these asks in a really structured way. They're creating roles, building skills and investing in capability alongside delivery. The next speaker is going to bring that to light with some real examples from funded projects. So on that note, I will hand over.
Great. Thanks for that, Lauren. Really insightful introduction there. And it's great to see the amazing opportunity available, not just in the district heating sector, but across the low carbon transition for green jobs and skills as well. And also that diversity point, which is really, really important. So I will hand straight over to Alistair Vivian, who's going to talk about the Chiltern Woods GHNF funded project, which is located on the northern edge of Sudbury in Suffolk. So go for it, Alistair.
Good morning, everyone. So yeah, thanks for listening so far. Yeah, as mentioned, I'm going to be talking about our project in Chiltern Woods, Suffolk. We're all right to skip to the next slide. So just a brief introduction about, the business I work in, Chiltern Woods, what skills we needed to be able to deliver the project, and obviously what the development was to enable us to do that, and basically the impact. So GTC are a multi-utility designer and installer. So we build gas, electric, water, fibre, wastewater, district heating, ground source heating, everything basically for new build sites, typically low density. We are owned by a company called BUK, who's got other subsidiaries, one of which is Metropolitan. And our sort of business model is that we will build infrastructure for ourselves to own and operate. So GTC are building heat networks. Metropolitan will own and operate them. And we started 4 years ago at Chiltern Woods as our first site. We've got a number of other sites up and running at the moment, but yeah, probably be on Chiltern Woods for another 4 years, maybe a bit longer. So as I mentioned, it's our first low density new build housing site. It's about 950 connections, individual plots, a mix of flats in there, but really sort of low rise flats. There's a school, we've got a commercial area, and the sort of network consists of an energy centre or heat hub with air source heat pumps. There is an electric boiler backup to cater for sort of 5% or less of the heat supplied by the network. So basically at peak times in the coldest months, that's when they would kick in. We've got a mix of UNO and Geo pipe work, and probably worth noting that GTC's responsibility is for the installation, the commissioning of that pipe work up to the heat interface unit. We have gone out to tender for our heat hub, so that's built by someone else. Okay, so in terms of what skills we needed, obviously general pipe laying, pipe handling, those that are aware will probably know that handling coils can be dangerous. As mentioned, it's a skill that we needed to have for this. We also needed to be able to butt fuse, electrofuse, and complete mechanical compression joints. And you can see some photos at the bottom there. Okay, so there's also shroud application. Again, a sort of new skill for us, but every joint you do, you've got to re-insulate, as you probably all know. And then testing, commissioning. So filling, flushing the networks, testing it, and treating the water as appropriate. Again, something new for us. Okay, so as I mentioned, we are a multi-utility company. We've been installing other utilities for decades, and have developed some skills. So we probably weren't coming into this at a standing start. In terms of pipe laying, it's something we're familiar with. We're familiar with some of the techniques, the electrofusion and butt fusion. In terms of water commissioning. You know, there's some sort of similarities to district heating water commissioning and network commissioning in terms of the filling, the flushing and the testing. I've put on there about working on low density new build sites. Obviously being familiar and safe to work in those environments is an important skill to have, especially if you're doing something new. If you're doing something new in a new environment, it will make it sort of extra challenging. And obviously within all those other utilities, we've been sort of adhering to industry standards, and we are licensed to install those utilities. So we've brought a lot of that sort of existing experience into how we've been able to roll out district heating sites and how we've been able to deliver those. So with regards to the training, if I'm being honest, probably as an industry, it's something we need to work on. We've got some existing manufacturers training, and, you know, in fairness, the manufacturer were really good. You know, they provided some on-site support as well as training. Obviously, it's in all of our interests to make sure that the product works, it's installed correctly, and it works for the customer. The majority of our training came from internal requirements. So, for example, we have got gas and water pipe laying installers. We've essentially copied the qualifications they need in those industries to be able to come over and work on district heating alongside some additional things like, as I said, the manufacturer's training. Some additional support on closed systems water treatment. Whilst the filling and flushing and testing generally are the same, the actual sort of water chemistry and water treatment are a lot different. And I wouldn't quite say we're fully there in terms of our development. We're still developing in that area. Probably the best training, and I'm sure lots of people find it the same, you do the job and you learn and you develop your process, and then you do the job again, doing it slightly differently, and you work out the best way to do it. So that on-site experience is crucial. I mean, probably for us, after spending a lot of time with a few operatives and individuals, we started bringing others to site to gain that experience so they could work with our sort of competent team. Obviously, initially, we hadn't quite detailed or determined our competency framework that we were going to use for district heating. We've got competency frameworks for other utilities that we've sort of developed and put into place. You know, we're sort of we don't just want them to do the training, because I've done the training and I wouldn't trust myself to install any district heating pipework. But we obviously want them to do the training. We want them to have experience of installing it. And then, as I mentioned, it's sort of an ongoing evolution about the internal sign-off and those exact requirements that we need our operatives to have to sort of deem them competent. So in terms of the impact, within GTC, we're quite fortunate. We've got field operatives probably around 400 across the country. So we were able to use some operational slack to sort of free up labour to be able to do this. Obviously, the backdrop to this is it's great that we're able to deliver district heating sites and schemes. And obviously, we've seen our sales of those creep up. We have seen a reduction in new build sites being sold with gas. Obviously, the Future Home Standard has just come out as well, so we're all very excited about that. So this, you know, one project manager and two operatives is basically what we've allocated to the project. That does fluctuate depending on the time of year, the workload, and it's all led by the developer and usually their completion time. So whilst we've sort of almost got 2 operatives fully allocated, there might be times where there's 6 or 8 or, you know, multiple different teams working on that site in different areas. Obviously, we can sort of probably apply that to all of our district heating schemes across the country. And probably what this doesn't include is additional roles within our sort of asset management side for the operation and maintenance of this. There's certainly been about 3 roles created in Metropolitan, not just allocated to this project, but to all low density district heating projects. So as mentioned, the new skills, sort of the mechanical compression joints was new to us, the shrouding, the insulation, and some of the water treatment. And as I mentioned, they're sort of currently limited as to what we can do in-house, but as I said, that's being developed. So obviously we've lined ourselves up to be able to deliver heat networks for new build housing sites. You know, that low carbon heating solution is obviously aligned to the Future Hope Standard, as I mentioned. So thanks for listening, although I think we're going to put the questions in the Q&A and then questions at the end, Michael.
I was going to say, I'm going to throw a sneaky question at you.
Okay,
Alistair. So you pointed out a couple of things that I think are really interesting. I think as an industry, we struggle to quantify how many jobs we're creating. As you said, exactly, there's so many different areas where jobs are created. We often think just in terms of construction roles. There's obviously roles that are being created in O&M. You guys are an existing multi-utility company. I'd be fascinated to sort of understand how transitioning some of those existing skills has worked for you, and where did you find genuine gaps that needed training? You know, are there areas that we should all be concentrating and trying to figure out how to fill gaps in the industry?
Well, as I mentioned, the transition in terms of the pipe laying, joining pipe together, you know, from an existing utilities background is relatively easy. It would be great to see some sort of nationally recognised courses and training and qualifications for district heating pipe laying and not having to rely on other utilities. So I think that would be really good. In terms of the bits that were challenging for us, I mean, as I mentioned, the shroud and the insulation element was new. You know, it's taken a bit of time to make sure we're installing it and we've got the right sort of quality control measures in place for it. But yeah, so in terms of training, we're heavily reliant on the manufacturer's training. And once they're trained, you know, from an industry point of view, once they've had that training, they're competent to install it, where there is a bit of a gap between doing the training and being competent.
Being out on site.
Yeah.
Super important. Thank you very much. I'm sure we will have more questions at the end, but Michael, am I handing back to you?
Yeah, briefly. I don't think there are any other questions in the chat for now. I can see that obviously Tim shared the operation and maintenance video link, so thanks for that, Tim. But if there aren't any more questions, what I'll do is I will move straight on to Lisa and Joseph from Hemico and Metropolitan Thames Valley to talk through upskilling the workforce in Clapham.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. And good morning, everyone. My name is Joseph Reed. I am Senior External Affairs Manager at Hemico, who are working in partnership with MTVH on the Clapham Park Regeneration Scheme and Heat Network. Lisa, did you want to briefly introduce yourself as well before we kick off?
Yep, and I'm Lisa Johnston. I'm Head of Regeneration at MTVH Housing Association, and I am going to be just giving a quick overview on the next slide. So if we can have the next slide, please. So yeah, MTVH is a large housing association with a big development arm, and we are still building stuff right now. Clapham Park is our biggest estate regeneration, and we are the long-term landlord and steward of that, as well as doing the development with a joint venture with Vistry. When it's completed, it will have doubled in size to over 4,000 homes, and over 3,000 of those are going to be on our heat network. Some other stats on there that I won't go into, but in terms of the history of having a district heat network and an ESCO to operate it, yeah, that was a really important decision for us in terms of putting that big and specialist kit into the hands of a specialist to own and operate it, and it's left us in a decent position with regulation of the industry and not being an accidental utilities provider ourselves. We've already got Hemico doing that for us. And in terms of building the Clapham Park master plan, yeah, we took the decision in 2022 with our joint venture partner to, before we started building EC1, which you can see on there, which is our main energy centre, which was originally designed to be a gas-powered system. What would it look like if we were to actually decarbonise now on the basis of, we have over 2,000 more homes to build. We need to make sure they are compliant with Part L and wanted to be in a good place for the future home standard as well. Yeah, that resulted in us taking the decision with Hemico to actually let's do this. So the two energy centres we've got on there, EC2 is gas powered and will act as a backup to EC1, and EC1 is a huge energy centre that is air source heat pump powered. And to do that decarbonisation, we tapped into funding from GHNF, which has been brilliant in terms of making sure that we could do it at that opportune moment in the build. So I'll leave to Joseph to go on to the exciting techie stuff, but just in terms of, hopefully this is helpful in terms of the scale of Clapham Park. Everything in green is already either connected to the heat network or has been adopted and will be connected later on, and all of those blue blocks are future connections for the heat network. So big and exciting bit of infrastructure. Over to you, Joseph.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lisa. Michael, could we have the next slide, please? Excellent. So just to provide a bit of an overview from Hemico's perspective of the Clapham Park heat network and some of the MTCs that we've agreed as part of the GHNF funding for the decarb. So here you can see our team are already hard at work on the installation of the air source heat pump units and the thermal stores. Some quite complex lifts involved in that process for the installation into the energy centres that Lisa referenced. But overall, we've got really a 35-year concession with MTVH for the build and the expansion of this network. That means that we've agreed to around 200 jobs in various professional, technical and basic skill roles over the lifetime of that project. Up till now, we've hit 25 construction jobs at peak employment, and that is a figure that we expect to maintain as the network and the regeneration area gradually expands. There's also a number of roles that have been supported across the business in asset management, in connections, in customer service, and other roles associated with the funding that's been secured through GHNF. I think maybe just to highlight some of the kind of nicer stats about this, we've got a number of local employees working on this scheme, living in the area. We've got 3 of our core electricians working on the scheme who live in Clapham, Balham, Tooting, and there's an estimated investment there of around thousand in the electrician side of the work. We've got multiple subcontractors who are working on the scheme, also based locally, talking investments in the scale of the 50,000s, 60,000s for those pieces of work. So we're really seeing a regular drumbeat of local investment being driven into the Clapham area as this project's expanding, and it's a commitment that we're going to maintain as this project grows over the 35-year period. Long when all of us are now gone, that good work will continue, and we're really pleased to be part of it. Could I have the next slide, please, Michael? I think this is just a nice spotlight. I think the numbers are always important, but I think one thing that we really try to highlight as an organisation are the stories of those that are involved, particularly when we're trying to communicate the benefits of local employment as a sector more widely, and what is it that we're trying to achieve as a new utility that is coming to grow in the UK from a relatively small 3% of the market. So I wanted to spotlight Callum. Alistair, I'm conscious earlier you were talking about pipe fitters. We've had similar challenges as well, where it's certainly a growth opportunity, and finding good pipe fitters locally is gold dust. So we're really pleased when we do have people like Callum, who is actually based in the Clapham Park, in one of the blocks, living there, and working on the installation of this infrastructure and the decarbonisation of his home, really. So I think we're really keen to highlight these individuals who are making a difference in the areas where they live and the areas where they work, and I think that probably takes us to a wider point that I don't think we really say enough as an industry, whereby lots of construction jobs and lots of roles that are created in the construction sector can be quite transient, and you are often away from home working on projects, but actually heat networks create a local employment opportunity within the construction sector, whereby someone can live in a city with a heat network and have a relatively regular employment opportunity to grow and build a heat network that is making a meaningful difference in the place where they live. So I think that's something that we're really trying to bang the drum about and be proud of as a sector, because I think it's something that's quite unique and something that's quite special about the work that we're doing. Could I have the next slide, please? I think this is probably just to take a step back from Clapham Park and look at the wider opportunity here. I know Lauren referenced earlier the 35k, I think, by 2030 figure. Heatnick's also kind of looked at the wider opportunity across the supply chain and across the sector, and the scale of investment and job creation that is possible. And we've got about 100 billion worth of private investment waiting to launch, really, and create a wave of green jobs that are locally based and contributing to the regions in which they are being delivered. I think from our perspective as Hemico, the point that we try to make here is that the opportunity is massive, whereby it's one of the largest utility growth opportunities in Europe, the heat network sector in the UK, and with that you've got the potential to create a new UKPN, a new, Thames Water, well, not Thames Water, and a new Cadent, and that comes with thousands of jobs that are regionally based, that create a micro industry within a town that can sustain it for generations. So I think that's something that we really need to grasp onto, and we're working closely with government to recognise that investment opportunity and to create the policy environment to enable that growth and that opportunity. I think from our perspective as a developer, we often see a lot of discussion within Parliament and officials around what these skills interventions that can be carried out to enable the growth of these sectors. And sometimes we like to flip this the other way around, where actually, if you generate the demand, if you create the right policy environment, an enabling environment for that investment to come through, the sector itself will solve the skills gap, and we will put the time and the investment into identifying how we can grow that skills pipeline in advance of need. So I think that's probably a key point that we want to land. And an example of where we have done that is on the next slide, Michael, if you're happy to turn over. Recently, in 2024, the Heat Networks Industry Council identified an upcoming gap, really, in its operations and maintenance skills pipeline. So there was an industry trailblazer group led by our operations director, Toby Powell, to develop a heat network technician maintenance apprenticeship. That has both specializing in the plant maintenance, so that's something like operating an energy center and also operating heat interface units and doing that maintenance work that's more customer facing, more consumer facing on the communal network. That has now been launched by South City College Birmingham, and we're really pleased to see the first cohort progressing through that apprenticeship. It's a 3-year NVQ level 3 duration of 36 months, I said, and IMECI endorsed. Is a really good scheme that we're trying to shout as much about, and we are engaging with partners in other cities to see if they are able and willing to launch this in their own colleges, because obviously in London, Hemico's got a significant pipeline of forthcoming heat networks, and we're trying to address that skills gap ahead of need. So I think positive things coming. We just as a sector need that demand certainty from government and demand certainty from customers that we will have the jobs to fill. So that's probably the message that I'd leave it with, and then I will hand back to Lauren for questions.
Thanks for that, Joseph. I think it's really fascinating. I love the fact, especially that last slide, that we can tell people now that we've got a pipeline of opportunities that and the scale to ask for these training schemes. It's such a positive step that we've taken forward there. I'll come to you, Joseph, first. I'm going to say, as Hemico and across this scheme, but also your wider portfolio of projects, you have committed to a large number of jobs to be created. How are you going to leverage this scale to make sure that each new role has the potential to create more, and what help do you need to achieve that?
Yeah, I mean that's a really helpful question, Lauren. I think part of it is the point that I was discussing earlier, where obviously a lot of these skills clusters are going to emerge within the same cities where we have demand opportunities, where those heat network pipelines are forthcoming. So we're active in the West Midlands, we're active in London, we're active in a number of cities across the UK, and we've got the zoning regs coming into effect hopefully this year. We've got a lot of really positive signals from government that are just generating that demand, and the clearer that can be, the more that we can invest in that pipeline of skills and make sure that we are kind of engaging locally with colleges, giving them the certainty that we will be able to provide them the skills pipeline. I think anecdotally we're engaged with one college in London, and I think the key barrier that's held them back from launching the apprenticeship is just having an understanding from the sector that X number of apprentices will come through every year, and they will have that guarantee of funding. So as Hemico, what we're trying to do is just be that convener and that amplifier for those in the sector that do have this skills need, but just might not be able to actually deliver it unilaterally. And actually what we need to do is aggregate that skills demand, make clear to these colleges and to government that they can expect a certain pipeline within a certain time, and then we can actually get through to delivery, which is the exciting part.
Completely love that. Lisa, I'm going to go a little bit wider for my question for you. You've obviously been putting this heat network in as part of a much wider project. How has the heat network fit into your wider social plans for the site, your social value plans?
It's made it really interesting. Obviously, with a large planning consent to deliver all of those homes, we've got various commitments through the Section 106 in terms of job creation, local labour. But we always try and kind of do more with our supply chain. So actually having a huge bit of infrastructure on site in terms of the heat network, and also really kind of interesting and engaged team at Hemico to work with. Has meant we've been able to kind of do joint presentations at job fairs and things. We've also done some really fun stuff through some summer holiday programs with a company called the Regeneration Brainery. And they look at all aspects of routes into regeneration and construction industry. But really interesting in terms of kind of capturing kind of older young people at that front end of maybe just starting to think about a potential career, and the ability to kind of make visible something that is physically behind doors a lot of the time, and to show the range of skills and routes into the industry, and just get people excited about it, which I think is obviously a really important precursor to then having those courses available. Has been brilliant. So I suppose the short answer is it creates opportunities. It's in terms of kind of getting creative with how we do our kind of skills and workplace focused social value work. And there's a lot more obviously in the pipeline in terms of what we can do and join up with with our developer partners to kind of tap into people who are maybe more interested in these kind of more techie mechanical bits of opportunities on their doorstep. And also we do a lot with local schools, universities. So the stuff that Joseph was talking about in terms of creating these more of these apprenticeship courses, I think that could lead to some really interesting conversations with with some of the schools and universities outreach stuff that we do on a more general or wider basis as well. So it is really interesting, and so exciting to have something that's a bit of a case study as well in terms of that our very big decarbonised network.
I love that you brought up the point of the visibility of these jobs sometimes. I've often thought that the fact that we bury our pipes once we've put them in makes them just not as visible as some other interventions. It made me immediately think, Alistair, of the community energy hub that's been built at Chiltern Woods. It's one of the prettiest energy centres I've ever seen. So that visibility piece, I think, leans over into some of the work that you guys have been doing too. Oh, I think we might have just lost Alistair. Yeah, I think he might have disappeared. Michael, have we got any questions for the team at all?
It doesn't look like there's anything that's come through in the chat. Oh, Alistair is here. Alistair, can you hear us? Yes, great. Okay, yeah, no, that's yeah. If you wanted to come back on that, Alistair, on Lauren's point, then feel free to type in the chat if your microphone and camera's malfunctioned. I'm not sure what's happened. What's happened there? Let me just try and see if I can turn your. Oops. Never mind.
We've lost him. That's
Yeah.
no worries. If anyone's got any questions after the fact, please feel free to drop us a note and get in touch. I'm sure our speakers would be more than happy to pick up. Are you back, Alistair?
Yes. Sorry. I thought Michael didn't want to hear my answer for that one, and had axed me from the from
Did
the
it on
promise
purpose.
I promise it wasn't me.
I'm only joking. Sorry, Lauren. What was the question again?
Really, it was just reflecting on. I know the community energy hub, some amazing posts that you guys have been able to put up. Have you had people coming round? Have you? Do you know whether the community engagement has started?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've given tours to customers that have moved into site. We're obviously engaging with, people from Ofgem and Besnez and, all sorts of other house builders as well.
Amazing.
But what I would say, you know, it's not just that site. You know, we've got other sites with the heat hubs going up, and that's sort of our template. Because the more our sort of end customer can buy into heat networks and understands it, you know, the better the sales are for the developer, which is obviously good for us. You know, better, you know, I mean, the customers get lower bills comparatively to gas anyway, but yeah, there's definitely an education piece there, which is probably why a lot of thought has gone into the visuals.
Yeah, I think there'll be, give it 10 years, we're going to have lots of mini apprentices coming through from visiting Chiltern Woods, I think.
Hopefully.
That's lovely. Alistair, I had sort of one, we sort of spoke about it a bit earlier. I had sort of one question for you. You discussed your sort of internal competency framework, and you've talked a lot about how getting on site is important. Is there anything in your approach that you think could be more widely adopted across the sector?
Well, it's probably important to caveat that everyone, you know, needs to work out exactly what they need to determine that people they're instructing are competent, you know, and that'll come in a wide range of shapes and sizes. I mean, as I said, because we've got existing frameworks with other utilities, it was easier for us to copy what we know. I mean, in terms of what we're doing, you know, the training is your sort of minimum requirement to be on site doing that job, and then you're sort of almost under supervision until you're deemed competent, until you've got enough experience. And that's probably our sort of best approach thus far.
Perfect. I think given the amount of people that we want coming into the industry, fingers crossed, we're going to be seeing a huge amount of apprentices coming through, a huge amount of people retraining as across relevant sectors. And fingers crossed, the next time we have one of these sessions, we'll have another Callum that we can put up on screen. Maybe we'll get him to come along and he can tell us all about the experience of maintaining his own heating system for his heat network. That's really exciting. So I'm going to say, unless we've got some questions that have come through, I'm going to start, hopefully give everyone a little bit of time back in their day and say thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you, Joseph, Alistair, Lisa. A few things that I guess I've drawn out from what I've heard. Firstly, clearly this skills issue is not a theoretical issue. Projects are already having to solve workforce challenges in real time, whether that's training existing teams, bringing in new entrants, and I think probably we're all going to end up working more closely with supply chains. Secondly, most of the workforce growth that's coming is from transition rather than entirely new roles, and people moving across from adjacent sectors. That makes upskilling and consistency of training particularly important. And I guess one to think about really now going forward is operational capability is becoming just as critical as those construction roles. Delivering networks is one part of the challenge. The big challenge going forward is making sure we're running them really well over the long term, making heat networks something that people are pleased to be on. So the direction of travel is clear. The sector is scaling, but it's also maturing. We're getting towards having more structure around skills, more sharing of learnings, and a greater focus on that long-term capability. The GHNF will continue to do everything we can to support through the fund and keeping up with everyone on their market transformation commitments, talking and sharing learnings from the projects that we're working with. One thing I was going to mention, a shameless plug, Lisa was really kind enough to say some lovely words about the applicant support that we're able to provide to people who are applying for the GHNF. We have a round open at the moment. If you are looking to apply, please make sure you're speaking to a member of my team. Libby and Joanna will be really, really happy to talk to you about projects, whether you're looking to come forward in this round or the next round. So if you need contact details, if you haven't spoken to someone yet, please do reach out. It really does make a difference. We try to make the application as easy as possible. And thank you again to our speakers, and thanks everyone for joining. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.